Hello. This is called The Flower Was Like Milk on the Odyssey, Book 10, lines 274 to 335. So Odysseus heads away from the sea up through the sacred glades of Circe and is about to arrive at Circe's house when he is intercepted by Hermes' golden wand. The entrance into sacred glades, hieras anabassas, perhaps suggests that the journey of Odysseus is both an ascent and a penetration into something mysterious, unlike that of Eurylochus and his men, who merely entered some woods, bassas. Those who are initiated or capable see more in the same vista than those who are not. Hermes' interception seems not a chance encounter. We later learn that Circe herself, she of many drugs, Polyparmachos, had been forewarned by Hermes at some indefinite moment in the past that a certain Odysseus would be visiting on his return from Troy. Is it just me, or does Hermes seem a bit camp? He is described as looking like a youthful man with the first hairs on his lip, whose bloom is at its most ravishing. Niai andrive moikos, proton hupanatei, tu per cariestate habe. There can be little doubt in that last phrase, cariestate habe, of the sexual nature of Hermes' attractiveness. To be sure, the attraction implied is in the beholder Odysseus, but there seems to me to be an intimacy, a flirty playfulness about Hermes' banter. Oh, you sad man, where now? Wandering the hills all alone. You don't even know your way around the place. Paidauto dustane, diacrias erge haioios. There is a fixation today with typing people sexually, so that some people are gay and others straight and others bisexual. For example, as a matter of a supposed fixed identity. It is said with confidence that we are born this way, as if by a combination of nature and fate. I'm not sure what is behind the modern and often painful obsession with identity and allegiance to type, including an attendant hypocrisy and, in many, a deliberate obfuscation. All I know is I am a remarried man who finds just about everybody I know a little bit queer. In Homer, there seems to be a casual obviousness that Odysseus would be attracted to a young man of such a growth and nature, two words which we shall soon be obliged to ponder. Yet it would seem as perverse to call Odysseus bisexual as it would heterosexual. The first signs of hair on the lip or down on the chin were thought to display the acme of ripeness in a boy who was ready for the plucking. In Athens and the ancient world generally, such youths become objects for older males in the culture of paiderastia. Today, such interest on the part of older men is considered a toxic and even criminal pedophilia, albeit especially, but not only, when directed at prepubescent children. We perhaps see an example of ancient pederasty in the Odyssey in Athena's disguised tale, when she is Mentes, remembering Odysseus' visit to his family home. The young man had come there after a failed mission elsewhere to secure unholy poison for his arrows. But Mentes' father, so says Athena to Telemachus, used to love young Odysseus so dreadfully that he himself gave him said poison, apparently at the risk of retribution from the gods. It is Mentes' theme that young Odysseus was one hell of a looker, and quite a jolly lad at a party. Perhaps she hints that it will take a bowman with poisoned arrows to make her wish come true, the one where Odysseus will suddenly appear before Penelope's suitors in his youthful form. In the Iliad, Odysseus seemed to be no sort of bowman, something of a meta-puzzle. Aside from cues in Hermes' speech, which might always reside in the imagination merely of a reader who fancies he's being flirted with, one might also suspect that the Homeric performer was like any actor, who generally relishes the chance to ham it up. Camp is a staple of the male actor's energeia, by which I mean the active fulfillment of his nature. So it makes sense that Odysseus' description of Hermes' inviting appearance would be a cue for him to deliver the god's speech with a wink and a sachet. It is only an absurd sort of prudishness in scholars and front-facing teachers which prevents them registering sexuality in Homer's depictions, so to allow them to cast him in the moral vanguard of great books for youth, quite the opposite of, for one, Plato's reception of him. This repressive mindset makes a subject like Achilles' physical intimacy with Patroclus rather drolly a matter of controversy. It is not generally supposed, for example, that Telemachus has sex with Pisistratus, Nestor's son, although they sleep together, and Telemachus refers to his bosom buddy as the, quote, pleasurer of this, my own life's breath. Toi moi ke charismene tu moi. This does not make the boy gay, although by the end of the poem a case could certainly be made that Telemachus is uncomfortably a misogynist. The fact is that all the rest of Pisistratus' older brothers, Nestor's sons, go to bed with their wives. It seems to be understood, shall we say normal, that pubescent boys not yet ready for marriage might be expected to take the pleasure of each other. Certainly, Pisistratus is offered to Telemachus as his bedmate. Perhaps a similar thing could be understood about girls who go unchaperoned, except by a brace of mules, to wash clothes in the woods. Unseen, except by a leering audience, Nausicaa and her maids take off their veils, a thing done on the wedding night and also a metaphor for rape when done to you. And they play ball. Scholars who purvey in Homer of metrical formulas and Victorian pretensions need the grown-ups to tell them that neither life nor music work that way. Hermes reveals a drug, which is to say a plant or herb, which will protect Odysseus from the potent pharmaca Circe will be expected to mix into his meal, and somehow forestall his transformation into a piggy. But as we've already learned, the enhanced porridge is not enough for the trick. There must also be a gesture from the actor's prop. Whenever Circe prods you with her extra-long wand, that's when you draw the sharp sword from by your thigh and jump on Circe as though minded to kill her. She'll get a fearful shock and she'll demand that you have sex with her. There and then is where you no longer turn down sex with the goddess. So she releases you your comrades and takes care of yourself. This would be the one time in the Odyssey where the phrase about drawing the sharp sword from by your thigh, a staple from the Iliad, is not used as a send-up, in that the action that follows is actually a threatened attack and ambush, not some ignominious retreat or a makeshift non-use of the sword, as we come to expect from the Odyssey. But all the same, it is slightly funny coming as an instruction in this way, rather than part of an instinctive reaction or intentional act. What is more, the instruction is to pretend to attack a goddess, a female, and then be met with a counterattack which is not mortal combat, but a demand for sex. Perhaps there's a double meaning in that. Oh, behave. A sword is just a sword. The explicit threat Circe presents, according to Hermes, is the unmanning of Odysseus. That is, his castration. Before acceding to Circe's bed, Odysseus is to demand a sacred oath that she not plan another shitty calamity, Pamakakon, against him. The most feared of these possible outcomes is specified. Lest when you strip naked, she make you a lowlife with no man-balls. Mea sapagum no tentakakon kai anenorate. To make a man a non-man, anenor, when they're naked, seems to suggest a castration or some other form of mutilation. This particular threat to manhood recurs in the Odyssey. Castration is likely the adulterer's penalty facing Ares for his trysts with Aphrodite. Some would interpret the skewering of the eye of the Cyclops as a displaced version of the same. From now on, however, after Circe, threats from females and the feminine come to the fore in these wanderings, whether Odysseus is naked or uselessly armed. Men don't like to be reminded how vulnerable they are, especially when naked and aroused. The Odyssey will not spare the man. The poem certainly seems to have a program on the nature of the human male, the aner, genitive andros, quite distinct from any such thing in the Iliad, where we might perhaps speak of a program on the nature of the hero. The Odyssey's way, however, may simply be the way of all comedy, on the compelling haplessness of masculinity, veering always from the ridiculous to the sublime. Men are pigs. But there we come to a distinction beyond which I am not able to see clearly. The one between comedy and tragedy. I do not hesitate to try to define these things, but the things themselves, comedy and tragedy, resist reduction. They persist and re-emerge through all their instances, like the varieties of mammals and insects, in multifarious manifestations, which nevertheless convince one of their separateness and irreconcilability. Consider their Greek names as Greek: Tragoidia, goat song, or Komoidia, procession song, or revel song. How on earth would we name these things with which we are terribly familiar without Greek? Would the notion of song be involved at all? The mother of all these distinctions is nature herself, a mother of twins and opposites. Thou, nature, art my goddess. To thy law my services are bound. To be sure, Edmund may be addressing nature as a proper name, yet he could not address any other divinity or revered figure, say Athena or Aphrodite or Mother Mary, and mean remotely the same thing, apart from his devotion to their decree. How might Edmund say what he means, declare the same thing, without using the word nature? Come to that, how might anyone say what they mean without using nature when they need it? I have already used it several times, and have no substitutes. The nature of the human male, the actor's nature. Words that cannot be paraphrased easily, but are also indispensable, flash red warning lights. Do not their confident use mask a sort of woolly-mindedness? There are many words like this fundamental to our modern descriptive vocabulary. Instinct, gravity, evolution, human, energy, to name a few. Science cannot be the quantifying of magical names. How would modern science advertising, politics, or psychology not be struck dumb in their attempts to describe or influence the world if they were robbed of the use of these words? Gods and spirits have been banished, but only by their proper names. If we happen to live in a dark age of science and history, how would we know? It seems to me that scientists and economists and the like should force themselves to say it in English. As it were, you can substitute your own native language. Too often the industry jargon self-selects a members-only club, where esoteric or merely parallel nomenclatures constitute as many Masonic handshakes. Many of us have experienced the abomination of weed-out courses at all levels of education. They reflect a pretense to competence which too easily masks an institutionalized ignorance. Tests test the tester. Nobody really knows how the calculus works, only that it does. Meanwhile, weeds themselves are too interesting for school. Knowledge need not be about quantifying anything. But since scientists were invented in the 19th century, their religion has seemed to involve timing or otherwise scrutinizing the various normal motions and other purported behaviors of the sort of magical entities posited above, as they managed to corral them in the immediate vicinity of the earth. Science then projects the mathematical descriptions of these local motions and behaviors, saddled with the a priori presumptions of balance and conservation inherent in algebraic equations, upon the entire cosmos and the universe. This is a diabolical delusion. Most of the observable is not in fact solid, liquid, or gas, but ionized plasma. But only inert gravitation is allowed to play a role in the form and motion of the solar family and the galaxy. Sir Isaac Newton, in the very final paragraph of his volumes of Principia Mathematica, first alludes to the polar, attractive, and repulsive nature of electricity and magnetism, as though they were a subtle and insinuating spirit. His followers have since allowed the serpent back into the garden on the apparent condition that they are zero-sum in the equations, so that they must be of no consequence to the gravitational equilibrium they assume. These people find invisible black holes everywhere, more than one, and they pay no heed to enigmas about the natures of energy and matter. They're too busy looking for the dark versions, as though their assumptions would force them to switch off the lights on possible observation. You can't make this up. A consensus of professional scientists and teachers think that the great bulk of the matter and motion in the cosmos is dark matter and dark energy, unobserved by them and perhaps unobservable. So much for empirical science. This is belief in invisible things to satisfy equations they themselves have written. Equations are actually brutally primitive kinds of sentences. They don't use any verbs worth distinguishing except to say that equals does not mean is. All the operations, the additions, divisions, and so on, are nested and packed into deceptive agglomerations on each side of an equal sign. The grossness of their shorthand constitutes both the impotence of equations as disclosive speech and their impact as totems with a spell-like power to enchant. Consider that the principle of the conservation of energy, or the idea that every action produces an equal and opposite reaction, are each a mental need before they answer to any sort of reality. Truly, their a priori quality counsels caution in applying them, as though freely and judiciously, to a world where successful species go extinct. Almost all the universe is plasma and not neutral inertial matter. And many or most actions do not produce a reaction, because cowardice is a very real thing in humans and animals alike. If about so many beings and processes, and just about every line of Homer, we can say that there thingy is more than the sum of its parts, what standing might one expect of a stipulated science whose sentences consist solely of equations? Saying it in English, eliminating the all-explanatory jargon, would help ground scientists' thinking in the experienced realities, and thereby both critique it and elevate it to what Newton himself called natural philosophy. Why do things fall to the earth? And why do I feel heavy? Don't say gravity like a scholastic and an imbecile. Explain it rather in your own words or with your body, as you can, and with any props that might help. If Circe measures the doses of the drugs she slips into her wine soup, Homer and Odysseus do not say. But she just knows, doesn't she? Like one of those chefs with knowledge in the pinch between their fingers. The poet can render wisdom, knowledge, and science as a goddess with whom a man would like to sleep. Is there any merit to the idea that wisdom or the knowledge of nature are not accessible simply to the measurements and consequent equations of science? The encounter with Circe takes caution. One must prepare. It is an initiation. Is there perhaps something about the sex itself, the polarity and unity of male and female, and the other combinations, and the initiation always involved in first sexual encounters, which transcends the ability of equations, even the so-called laws of nature, to capture? The trope of the hero seeking to sleep with the goddess, however, to sleep with wisdom and maybe become Einstein or Elon, is turned on its head in Homer's telling. This time it is the goddess who demands to sleep with the hero. Hermes comes to Odysseus like a snake in the garden. He is conspicuously Hermes of the golden wand, Chrysor Rapis, although there is not a hint that this wand is the caduceus with intertwined snakes. Of course, in our imagination, we embellish the performer's staff in the way that he directs us. Evidently, Hermes imparts Odysseus some knowledge that, for Circe, is worth sleeping with. As unlikely as it seems, Hermes, the flirtatious Olympian, must have some kind of higher knowledge, at least of forest foraging pharmacology, than Circe. But the knowledge of a plant's unique growth has never been subject to science, only to descriptive art. One of the joys of reading ancient composers and poets, especially early Greek authors, is that they did not have a dead language to draw on for technical and metaphysical terms, like technical and metaphysical. Hence they had no choice but to say it in Greek, meaning say it in their own words. Aristotle's metaphysics is actually called On the Stuff After the Physics, ton metatapusika. Tapusika are the things that develop by nature or have a nature. Whenever Aristotle, who is not early, but was a pioneer in developing terms of art in explicating his thought, used a word to refer to the stuff that things are made of, it was hula, woodland, or more to the point, timber. When Cicero translated Aristotle for his audience, he did not translate this word, but used a calque, materia, Latin timber. Hence we have matter, an abstract concept from the start, with no hint of a metaphor in its embryo. I should think this absence makes us handicapped in our conversation with the idea, as it were. Matter has us at a disadvantage. It seems to be a pre-existent being in the usage and understanding of people who practice modern physics, although nothing whatsoever empirical can be pointed to. Elements or atoms of matter are elements and indivisibles of what exactly? Scientists surpass all artists in their mostly unwitting immersion in broken metaphors. It is not that being close to the lingual roots of a word solves any problem in apprehending its referent. Metaphysics remains a thing which compels an arduous climb to the summit of philosophy, although in the word itself we have a rather pure case of our reifying a lecture title, perhaps coined for the use of a compiler rather than by an author, and which only seems to connote an appendix. I suppose the stuff that comes after the physics is, for Aristotle, what physics itself presupposes. Matter also remains a concept and an enigma, even in Aristotle's timber. How, after all, does a living tree turn into wood, and wood turn into timber? And what if the timber sprouts? Does it rather make a conflict between materialists and spiritualists look a bit silly? A conflict suited to the confusions of a dark age. When Cicero translates Aristotle's use of Greek phusis, however, he does not use a calque. Naturally, he uses natura. This is a word which points toward birth in referring to its concept, as indeed does Edmund. Aristotle's own word, and the word most Greek thinkers seem obsessed with, means growth or sprouting. Phusis is looking toward plants, while natura is gazing upon animals and all things which can be said to give birth. A photon is what we somewhat deflate by calling a plant. But there is no question that animals also, and embryology, are a principal inspiration for Aristotle's imagination in the physics. From physis we get both physics and physical, which can point in opposite directions. We'd say Odysseus is going to get physical with Circe, although you might also learn some physics. Always with Aristotle, the way his predecessors and contemporaries actually use a word is essential data in the process of definition. The ways phusis is used in Greek happen to correspond pretty well with many of the ways in which we use the idea, like naturally, by nature, mother nature, and so on. The development in animals and plants from seed and embryo, like the chicken from the egg, exhibits the unfolding of latent design, no matter the consternation of materialists. An analogy with artisans and timber plays a leading role in Aristotle's exposition. This is from Physics, Book 2, Chapter 8. It is absurd to suppose that purpose is not present because we do not observe the agent deliberating. Art does not deliberate. If the shipbuilding art were in the wood, it would produce the same results by nature. If, therefore, purpose is present in art, it is present also in nature. The best illustration is a doctor doctoring himself. Nature is like that. The way physiologists speak of an immune system which learns and has memory It seems a doctor in command of legions is already in the house, and a healing art is in the wood. We are evidently passengers. Imagine, then, the transcendent possibilities for a budding Homerist, metaphor intended, in reading a composer of Greek who not only does not have Aristotle to draw on for learned words to use, or even a dead language, but has no word for nature at all. How does he even talk? Yet Homer has plenty to say. Freedom beckons the Homerist, and perhaps you as well, in the music of Homer's words. We puzzle out their reference and move to the flow both of his native verbs and their vivid and vivifying rhythm, rather than tread the endless cloisters, pondering the nature of nature. It is exhilarating to experience this earth's and our body's phenomena, and others as well, in Homer's rhythms and distinctions, unblinkered of our habitual categories and formulations. There occurs a triangulation which makes the familiar unfamiliar, popping out anew at you, bringing peripheries into focus, as surely as 3 dimensions bring the world to 2. The word phusis occurs only once in all of Homer, and it comes when Odysseus describes Hermes' prophylactic gift. So he spoke and supplied the drug, the slayer of Argus. Once he drew it out of the earth, and he showed me the sprouting of it. At the root it would be black, but the flower was like milk. Moly is what the gods call it. It is difficult to dig up for men who are mortal, but the gods can do everything. Hos arapones aspore parmakon argepon tas, ek gaias verusas, kai moi pusin auto edexen. Riste men melaneske, galacti de vecelonantos. Molu de min kaleositeoi, kalepon deto russein, andrasi getnatoisi, teoi dete pantadunantai. The nature of the moly is something Hermes shows Odysseus. He need not teach it or explain it. It is evident directly in its sprouting. To be truer to Homer's actual text, its nature is its sprouting. But there's no nature in there at all, only the sprouting, phusis. Homer has no dealings with the word or the notion of nature. Not tragedy nor comedy, for that matter, and yet it seems that every second paragraph or sentence I reach for these words in trying to understand what I read in him. Am I cleverly taking Homer's hint? Or is it not more plausible that I find it impossible to escape the blinkers that this mind-drowning concept, nature, throws upon me at every turn? That my response betrays a dependence, a kind of religious obscurantism, like a convert who sees everywhere, behind the people and objects he encounters, signs of faith and grace. Moly is what the gods call it. What does Homer mean when he says that the gods use different names for things? Here, I think uniquely in Homer, we don't also get the human name for the herb, which is doubly curious. It seems that when they name things, the gods don't like to use Greek. Greek names are usually transparent etymologically, but many proper names of people, places, things, and gods are not. This includes Achilles and Odysseus, as well as Moly. I solicit your responses to this question. I don't have a good answer. I shall only say how powerfully and pervasively modern science has also adopted this rhetoric, to the point where it is deeply infixed in our minds that there are in fact true, that is, scientific names for things, and that they all come in Greek or Latin or some barbarous hybrid of the two. How self-satisfied do you feel? Admit it. When you acknowledge that you are a human being, and that means you are a primate. And you can use that fact in a conversation. We do not know the real name of the herba immolum, Homer's molu. Is it Allium nigrum? Or is it a kind of galanthus, the milk flower? It seems the latter contain an anticholinesterase, which combats poisonous anticholinergic intoxication, whose symptoms include amnesia, hallucinations, and delusions. Wikipedia seems to think that these could include thinking you've become a pig and forgetting the Mother Earth of your fathers. At the root it is black, but the flower is like milk, somehow liquidly white. It is the root which must anchor the moly to the earth so that it is troublesome to dig up. Apparently it could be known to our herbalists and Ayurvedics, except that it is too hard to dig up for mortals. In truth, this is not a growth which lends itself easily to Aristotle's vision. There is not an obvious way to point out material actualizing form. There is no egg, embryo, or chicken. To dissect a seed is to find embryonic root matter, and of course 1 or 2 cotyledons, embryonic leaves. A flower's petals are often modified, transformed leaves. One approach which seems appropriate is the modern observation of polarity in plants. Rupert Sheldrake's youthful research into this phenomenon suggests that plants are like permanent magnets. If you cut off a stem of willow, the part that was toward the leaves will sprout leaves, while the opposite end, otherwise identical, will only grow roots. In a similar way, if you break a magnet, the fragments immediately show new north or south poles, each in the direction of the original whole magnet. This polarity is already there in the seed of a plant and in every cell of its stem. But polarity is again perhaps a reductive and overly unifying way of doing justice to the phenomena. For one thing, the poles of a plant stem have wildly different characteristics, while the poles of a magnet can simply be flipped. The roots actively seek out the darkness and the earth, the hidden moisture and minerals, and whatever else is gleaming luridly there beneath the earth, while leaves and flowers reach out and upwards to the light and its radiant energy. These are opposite motives, not intuitively unifiable as form and matter. Roots and root systems have with reason been compared to neural networks. I sometimes wonder if we do not in general see plants upside down, yielding to our own habits of supposing which way is up in this world. To interpret the growth of the moly within the Odyssey, however, and within this episode, one is drawn neither to nature nor to polarity, but to transformation. What was black and earthy becomes in one growth white and milky. Of course, we do not see the moly in motion as though in time-lapse photography. We see it in still life. And yet this present image nevertheless suggests a process of metamorphosis along a linear axis. Men eat barley, cheese, wine, and pork. They also produce speech, hot air, and seminal fluid. Transformation seems not only a magical power wielded by Circe and sustained by Odysseus' men, but a fact of growth and assimilation. Dare I say, a fact of nature It is also vividly and immediately a fact of the presence of the performer before you, the Homeric rhapsode, who becomes all manner of speakers and conjures all manner of things, although what he is before you is a body and a voice, a cloak and a stick. It is notable that Hermes nowhere tells Odysseus what to do with the moly. Is he to grate it into the soup or drop it in whole? Or is he to ingest it at all? Hermes prescribes no dose. It is never even said that Hermes gives it to Odysseus. He just heads back up to Olympus, and Odysseus, all alone, walks off toward Circe's house, his heart heaving indigo. Cradier purpure chionti. Has Homer made an omission? The moly is not mentioned again, as if it has become a secret from the goddess, and it plays no physical role in Odysseus' encounter with Circe. In point of fact, the tension builds alarmingly. Odysseus says, "Out she came fast and opened the shining doors." That's a line we're now hearing for the third time. We're made to think that the same surreal sequence of lines, ending in man-pigs, is inexorably on its way again. At no point does Odysseus suddenly brandish the moly and say, "Ha ha! Have some of this, you witch!" That might have relieved the tension. But it is only when he draws his sword and dares to jump her that anything changes in the sequence. There is still another possibility, however, that actually all Odysseus needs to be safe is to know the moly, let's say its lesson, whatever that may be, in order to be protected from transformation, witting or unwitting, or any other Circean enchantment. Perhaps that includes the enchantment of science. Contemplate the molu, grok, its movement. No doubt, even contemplation can have its biases. Where Sheldrake pays attention to the stem to observe its potentialities, Homer disregards the stem and even the leaves entirely. Rhisdei men melanesque, galactide veke lonantos. While the root it was black, like unto milk, was the flower. I think we find it impossible not to see the flower as the culmination of the plant's effort at life, rather than just a part of its growth. It is the most amazing egg or seminal seed, yet devised by nature. But perhaps we may take a cue from modern biology and see the black root system not as a south polar fluorescence, but as the brain of a living, whole organism. The initiate in such knowledge may hold within him the milky flower born of his continuing obduracy and endurance. It takes a god to root him out. But Hermes is not the highest Olympian. Knowledge of the moly does not prevent Athena's transformations of him, though these are done on Odysseus' behalf, to be sure. She can age him and make him young again. But its shooting and its withering, petals curdling and falling, are not seen in the moly's flowering. Circe speaks on her knees, at Odysseus' knees. The significance of this moment of their combat before bed and Circe's recognition of exactly who it is now in front of her is underscored by the first and only echo of a word from the poem's very first line, the quality predicated uniquely of Odysseus. Polutropos, he of many turns. The man with the twist in his spine. I put it that way in my rendering because the word fills exactly the leftward retrogression and return, the turn, in the ancient Syrtos dance, to which each of Homer's verses can be performed. The twist in one's spine as one circles to the right is an unforgettable sensation for a dancer in the round. The sounding of Polutropos in the mouth of Circe, as told by Odysseus, is a meta moment. It links back from within Odysseus' tale of his wanderings to Homer's first line in the poem, a musical bridge across these wanderings and the arrival in Phaeacia, Calypso, and the whole Telemachy, to connect a spine to the poem itself. It also says that the conjunction with Circe is a significant moment of arrival, perhaps a pivot. One of the many exigencies of his polytropic attribute would seem to be that it makes Odysseus slippery, twisting and turning, hard to trap even without his secret knowledge of the Moli. Or perhaps there, precisely in that secret nature which only Hermes could reveal to him, is the twist which eludes Circe entirely. A thing can be many or opposite things, and take many turns, yet still be one. In sounding this word polutropos, after 10 books of poetry, many turns at its same place in the turn of the epic line, the poet who remains the unknown troubadour before us, who can become all things, has nevertheless created an enduring theme across the music of his poem so far. Homer is a nobody, an ootis. Would you not know the meaning of his name, where he's from, if he's a she, or what language he spoke natively? He's a nobody who has created by his metis, his lingual art, a being we have been convinced is a somebody. Even if Odysseus' characteristic is to change and transform, it is all the same an enduring characteristic. But there is more. We know Odysseus to be something else than his changing masks. In Homer's telling, we experience him in each scene from behind his turning plans and changing appearance. We are in on the game, even superior to it, through the privilege of Athena's eyes. Homer gives us that. His many turns along the way, including this one into Circe's bed, have always had an end, only sometimes expressed, but always true. His home and his marriage, and the lady there waiting. Homer, the performing chameleon, has therefore achieved, through his most protean art form, the crafting of a being in this Odysseus, who persists through all the changes. This being, like the Moli, has an enduring and recognizable, what else shall I call it? Nature. Circe for now gets the last word. Soi detisen tessin akalatos noos estin, sogodus seus essi polutropos hontemoi aie, pasceneleus estai crusor rapis arge pontas, ec troias anionta toeisun navi melainei. Halageda, coleoi meneaurteo, noi depita, eunas hameteras epibaomen, opramigente, eunei cae pilotati, pepoitomen allanloisin. Inside that chest of yours is a mind that cannot be enchanted. Surely it's you, the Odysseus, the twist in his spine, the one whom he always used to claim would come to me I mean Golden Wand, the slayer of Argus, as you came up from Troyland with your ship quick and black. No, come off it, scabbard your sword, then let's you and me mount up in my bed, so that once we fuck, the pair of us, and make love in bed, we might trust one another.